In 274 AD, Emperor Aurelian made a decision that would echo through millennia. Faced with the worst monetary crisis the world had ever known, he did not consult generals or senators. Instead, he ordered a series of economic decrees to be carved in marble, which today we read as astonishingly accurate prophecies about our own time. Rome was not just a civilization that crumbled, it was a gigantic laboratory where every monetary experiment we know was tested for the first time. Every crisis we face today, every economic dilemma that keeps us awake at night, every debate about inflation, digital currencies, and the collapse of trust has already been lived, documented, and carved in stone by the Romans. What makes this even more extraordinary is that they didn't know they were writing the instruction manual for the future. When Diocletian implemented price controls in 301 AD, he didn't imagine he was anticipating 21st century monetary policy debates. When merchants began rejecting the official denarius in favor of local currencies, they didn't know they were rehearsing the birth of cryptocurrencies. But perhaps the most disturbing thing is to discover that we are not the protagonists of a new economic history. We are supporting characters in a play that has already been staged, where every act, every twist, every financial catastrophe follows a script written 2,000 years ago. The difference is that now we have backstage access. We can read the notes left by previous actors, understand where they went wrong, where they succeeded, and most importantly, discover which act we are currently in. 238 AD, a baker named Marcus Aurelius Severus did something that would forever change our understanding of money. He refused to accept silver denarii from Emperor Maximinus, demanding payment in grain or gold instead. It wasn't political rebellion, it was pure economic mathematics. Severus had discovered that the denarii now contained only 5% silver, compared to 83% a century earlier. The empire was literally melting down its own currency, adding cheap metals to finance endless wars and an uncontrollably expanding bureaucracy. The result was the first documented hyperinflation in history, prices multiplied by 1,000 in less than 50 years. The parallel with our time is mathematically precise. Since 1971, when Nixon severed the dollar's last ties to gold, the American currency has lost 96% of its purchasing power. The Federal Reserve, like the Roman emperors, discovered that it's easier to create money than to create real value. The difference is that Rome physically had to melt coins. We just typed numbers into computers. But Severus had identified something even more profound. He realized that inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It is a disguised transfer of wealth. Each devalued denarius represented labor stolen from ordinary citizens and transferred to finance imperial ambitions. Each diluted coin was an invisible tax on those who could not protect themselves. The Romans called it tributum in monedas, taxation through currency. Today we call it expansionary monetary policy. The name has changed, the mechanism has remained identical. The only difference is that now we have economists to explain why this is necessary and beneficial. If this connection between the Roman crisis and our current inflation gave you that mental click that I had when I discovered this data, leave a like. I want to know how many people are seeing these patterns for the first time. The exact moment can be dated September 15, 260 AD. On that day, Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persians, and with him disappeared the last illusion that the Roman aureus represented real power. For the first time in history, a global currency lost credibility not due to metal scarcity, but due to a loss of trust in the power that issued it. The parallel with August 15, 1971, is impossible to ignore. When Nixon announced that the United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold, he was repeating the exact same script as Gallienus, Valerian's successor. Both discovered that maintaining a strong currency is incompatible with financing a declining empire. But the true Roman prophecy was not in the devaluation. It was in the market's reaction. Merchants in Alexandria began demanding payments in solidus, pure gold coins issued by local authorities. Merchants in Antioch created their own units of account based on baskets of commodities. The empire was monetarily fragmenting before it politically fragmented. Today, we observe the same phenomenon in slow motion. Countries are starting to trade in their own currencies, avoiding the dollar. Central banks are accumulating gold at a pace not seen since the 1960s. Cryptocurrencies are emerging as decentralized alternatives. China is launching a sovereign digital currency. Russia is anchoring part of its economy to commodities. What the Romans discovered, and what took 1,700 years to rediscover, is that currencies are not just technical instruments. They are manifestations of political power. When power falters, the currency falters. When trust fragments, the monetary system fragments with it. The difference is that Rome had only a few dozen monetary alternatives. We have thousands, and new ones emerged daily. In 286 AD, a naval commander named Carausius did something that modern central banks would consider unthinkable. He created his own currency and convinced millions of people to use it voluntarily. Not through military force, but by offering something the empire could no longer guarantee: stability and real value. Carausius coins contain 95% pure silver, while the official denarii barely reached 3%. More importantly, he allowed his currency to float freely against others, establishing exchange rates based on real supply and demand, not imperial decrees. In less than 2 years, merchants from London to Hadrian's Wall preferred his coins to the official ones. The parallel with Satoshi Nakamoto is disturbingly precise. Both created alternative monetary systems during crises of confidence in official currencies. Both offered mathematical transparency instead of political promises. Both allowed the market, not governments, to determine the value of their creations. But Carausius revealed something even more profound about the nature of money. He proved that currencies don't need armies to have value. They need trust. His Britannia coin was voluntarily accepted because people could verify its silver content. Bitcoin is voluntarily accepted because anyone can verify its mathematical scarcity. Rome responded in the only way declining empires know how to respond. It declared Carausius coins illegal and threatened merchants with imprisonment. The result was predictable: a flourishing black market where rebel coins were traded at substantial premiums over the official ones. Today, we observe governments following the exact same script. China bans Bitcoin, but mining migrates to other countries. The United States threatens to regulate cryptocurrencies, but innovation shifts to more friendly jurisdictions. History does not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes with mathematical precision. Share this with that person you know who is always talking about Bitcoin or economics. They need to see how this story was already written 1,700 years ago. Seriously, send it to them. In 408 AD, a merchant named Cosmas Indicopoulos wrote something that would sound familiar to any modern tech executive. Trade knows no boundaries, but emperors insist on building walls where they should build bridges. He was documenting the collapse of Roman trade routes and the emergence of alternative networks that completely bypassed imperial control. Cosmas had discovered that Chinese silk merchants preferred to trade directly with Persian merchants, avoiding Roman taxes and bureaucracies. Maritime routes through the Indian Ocean flourished while Roman roads deteriorated. The empire was losing economic relevance not through military conquest, but through logistical obsolescence. The similarity to current digital fragmentation is mathematically precise. Chinese companies like TikTok and Alibaba create ecosystems that operate independently of American infrastructure. Payment systems like Alipay and WeChat Pay process more transactions than Visa and MasterCard combined. Cryptocurrencies allow instant transfers that completely ignore the traditional banking system. But Cosmas identified the deeper pattern. Empires don't fall due to external invasion. They become irrelevant due to external innovation. Rome controlled physical roads, but couldn't control maritime routes. The United States controls the traditional banking system, but struggles to control decentralized networks. What makes this even more fascinating is that the Romans documented exactly how they tried to respond. Diocletian created a massive bureaucracy to control prices and trade routes. The result was that merchants simply stopped using official channels. The more Rome tried to control, the less relevant it became. Today, we observe governments following the same playbook: increasing regulations on technology, attempts to control cryptocurrencies, trade wars to protect obsolete industries. History suggests that these tactics accelerate, rather than prevent, the transition to new systems. Subscribe here because I will continue decoding these historical patterns that no one is connecting, and the next one will be about how Rome accurately predicted what will happen to the current banking system. You won't want to miss it. In 476 AD, when Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor, the true power structure had already completely changed. Real power was no longer in the imperial palace, but in the hands of a new class, the domini, landowners who controlled real resources while emperors controlled only increasingly empty symbols. These new patricians had learned the fundamental lesson that the political class ignored. In times of monetary instability, whoever controls real assets controls the future. While emperors debated the silver content of denarii, the domini accumulated land, cattle, grain silos, and, more importantly, the loyalty of people who produced real value. The parallel with our time is astonishingly precise. While politicians debate monetary policy and regulations, a new class of digital domini accumulates real assets. Jeff Bezos controls global logistics. Elon Musk controls space and energy infrastructure. Larry Page and Sergey Brin control the flow of world information. But the true Roman prophecy was not in the concentration of wealth. It was in the nature of that concentration. The Roman domini were not just rich. They controlled systems essential for the survival of civilization. When the empire collapsed, they did not lose power. They became the new system. Today, we observe the same pattern developing at an accelerated pace. The world's largest companies don't sell products. They control platforms. Amazon is not a store. It's commercial infrastructure. Google is not a search engine. It's informational infrastructure. Tesla is not a car manufacturer. It's energy infrastructure. The crucial difference is that the Roman domini controlled geographically limited physical resources. The new patricians controlled digital resources that transcend borders. They are not just richer than ancient emperors. They are more powerful than most modern governments. In 1776, Edward Gibbon concluded his masterpiece The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire with an observation he could not have imagined how prophetic it would be. History is indeed little more than the register of the crimes, follies, and misfortunes of mankind, repeated in cycles that each generation believes to be unique. Gibbon had identified the pattern that we can now see with mathematical clarity. Civilizations do not evolve linearly. They follow predictable cycles of ascent, complexity, decay, and renewal. Rome was not a historical exception. It was the first complete laboratory where we could observe and document every phase of the cycle. What makes our time unique is not that we are experiencing something new, but that we have full access to the data from the previous experiment. We know exactly where we are in the cycle, in the phase of excessive complexity that precedes forced simplification. We know what the next steps are because Rome has already executed them. The question is not whether the patterns will repeat. They are already repeating with frightening precision. The question is whether we can use this knowledge to navigate the transition more intelligently than our predecessors. Rome taught us that empires are not eternal, but that people who understand the cycles can prosper during transitions. That currencies are temporary, but that real value is permanent. That political power is ephemeral, but that control of essential resources transcends governments. More importantly, Rome showed us that the future does not belong to those who try to preserve the old system, but to those who build the next system. The domini who prospered after the fall were not those who tried to save the empire. They were those who created the structures that replaced it. Today, while political debates focus on preserving 20th century institutions, the true architects of the future are quietly building the infrastructure of the 21st century. They studied Rome. They understood the patterns. And they know that history does not wait for permission to continue its eternal course. The future that Rome predicted is not a prophecy. It is an instruction manual. The only question is whether we will read it in time. Now tell me in the comments, which of these patterns worries you most? The repetition of the monetary crisis, the emergence of the new digital patricians, or the fact that it might already be too late to change course? I want to hear your perspective on where we are in this cycle.